The recent string of violence against Asian Americans unfortunately isn't letting up. A suspect is in custody in connection with the vicious assault of a 65-year-old Asian woman who was walking to church near Times Square, New York, when she was pushed down, kicked, and beaten. You see here it's captured on surveillance video, while people inside watched, doing nothing except closing a door. The suspect faces assault and hate crime charges, but this story is far from over. The brutal nature of the crime, as well as others before it, has caused a surge in awareness of the dangers Asian Americans face, and it has stirred a call for action. Joining us right now is Olivia Waxman, who has written about the subject for Time magazine, and Susan Song is the director of the Division of Child, Adolescent, and Family Psychiatry at the George Washington University Medical Center. And hello to both of you. Susan, the violence here is drawing worldwide attention. The woman attacked in Times Square is an immigrant from the Philippines, and this week, the Philippine Foreign Secretary went on Twitter and said it's time for Philippine Americans to fight back with their right to bear arms. I mean, people are hurting here. What do you think is the way to go?
Yeah, it's extremely sad right now. I think, it's impacting our children quite a bit. We need to talk about racism with our children because they're experiencing it, they're witnessing it online. And if they don't have the language or the framework to understand what's going on, they end up believing something's inherently wrong with them and they're left feeling alone. If we give kids a language about racist behavior, they have this framework to understand the unfairness. And with that, it builds resistance against racial shame around their identity. They can feel more empowered to be allies and to counter racism.
And Olivia, you talked to some teachers after the deadly attack that we saw at the spas in Atlanta last month that left 8 people dead, 6 of them Asian women. And one teacher in Boston, Katie Lee, told you if people actually understood the history of Asian America, they wouldn't be so short-sighted in their statements addressing this moment. What would not be so short-sighted? And also, what needs to be happening in our classrooms right now to educate Americans?
Absolutely. So educators told me that one of the reasons these incidents come as such a shock is because there's so much Asian American history that's not taught in elementary schools and high schools in America. A full in-depth history of Asian Americans would include just the countless examples of mob violence, lynchings, harassment that Asian Americans have faced throughout U.S. history. And this is history that it's hard to talk about. It doesn't portray America in a positive light. And at the same time, it's so important for understanding why these incidents keep happening in America.
And Susan, you say kids need to be taught about this and not wait until they begin asking uncomfortable questions here. So people watching at home, they're getting ready to make dinner. What do they need to be thinking about how to frame this conversation with their kids? And maybe it's different for different ages.
Yeah, it's fantastic because people, especially Asian parents right now, we haven't had these conversations before with our own parents. And so we aren't quite sure what to say. We want to be silent about it because it's uncomfortable. Typically, our response to racism for ourselves is to instill a sense of racial pride because we're often seen as foreigners. But racial pride is complicated for Asian Americans who have a cultural belief that suffering is part of life, that we should put our head down, don't complain, work hard, stay quiet. But silence is not just being complicit, it's agreement. When you see that video that you just showed about this poor 65-year-old Asian woman, and the bystanders are just standing there watching and closing the door, right? That is not just being complicit, that's agreement. When we are silent with our children in having these conversations, it tells them there's something wrong with us because of the shape of our eyes or the color of our skin. So we need to start young, and we first say we have the intention of talking about racism. The goal for parents.
No, go ahead. Please continue, Susan.
Sure. The goal for parents is just to open the door and to give language in talking about racism. So we can say something bad happened in the news. I want to talk to you about it. Some people don't like us because of the shape of our eyes and the color of our skin, and that's called racism. And it's wrong. And it's different from the other mean things that kids say. And we ask about their experiences. How are they feeling? We validate that. We tell them what's going on is scary. We give them the language of fear because kids should not have to be scared to promote social justice or racial justice.
Olivia, quickly, last question to you. You have found Asian American and Pacific Islanders are often depicted in U.S. history lessons as outsiders, foreigners, or national security threats. But Asian Americans make up about 6% of the U.S. population. They're the fastest growing racial or ethnic voting bloc in the country. What needs to happen here to bridge this disconnect?
Absolutely. Well, we need to also be talking about how Asian Americans have helped shape American history. Asian American history makers like Patsy Mink and Larry Itliong. There are so many that we can be talking about who have just paved the way for so many Americans.
Well, Olivia Waxman and Susan Song will have to leave it there today, but thank you both for joining us on this topic. We appreciate it.